I was standing in the produce tent at the Cypress Landing Saturday market at 9:10 on the 14th of February, holding a flat of strawberries I had not decided to buy. I was there because of something Corky Bledsoe said on Thursday. Corky is 74 and fixes golf carts out of his carport on Sandpiper Lane, and he is not a man who repeats things. He said my daughter had come to his door and asked whether he had any work. Cash work. Anything. I did not sleep Thursday, and I did not sleep Friday. At 4 on Saturday morning, I gave up and sat out in the lanai with the light off, listening to the canal. So by 9, I was already looking, and this is what I saw in the order I saw it. Shelby had no purse, just a phone in her back pocket. There was a pale band on her left hand where her ring goes, and it was pale all the way through, which means weeks, not days. Nolan was chewing everything on the right side of his mouth, and he had been doing it since Monday. My daughter is 41 years old, and she had lost about 20 pounds since August. It was not the shape people lose it in on purpose. I spent 37 years learning the difference between those two shapes, and I have never once been wrong about it. Then Shelby asked her husband for $8 for the strawberries. And Grant said pleasantly, at a volume that carried past 2/10, "She doesn't need a card. She has me." Welcome back to Thistlegate Estate, where the overlooked finally claim what's theirs. If this is your first one, subscribe and stay with me, and tell me in the comments where you are listening from this morning. Now let me back up to Monday, because by Saturday I was already 6 days late. My name is Verna Pruitt. I am 68 years old, and I was a nurse for 37 years. 20 of them on a med-surg floor at the county hospital, and the last 11 as a charge nurse, which mostly means being the person who says the thing nobody wants said. The habit that never left me is that I read a body before I read a chart. Charts are what people decided to write down. A body is what actually happened. I live in Cypress Landing, a 55 and over community in Colusa County, Florida. Concrete block, 1978, a carport, a lanai, a canal out back with a heron who has opinions, golf carts on the paths after 5, an HOA that will write a person up for a screen door. Third Saturday of every February, that HOA does the hurricane shutter inspection. Somebody walks every carport in the community and checks that the panels are stacked, labeled, and countable. Half of those carports get done by Corky Bledsoe because Corky is retired and thorough, and it gets him out of the house. Mine is one of his. My husband was Ellis Pruitt. He drove a delivery route for a bakery for 31 years, and he died 4 years ago in March, and what he left me, besides the house, was an annuity worth $74,300. I have not touched a dollar of it. It sits there, being the only thing either of us ever managed to save, and I have always assumed it would go to Shelby the day I do. Ellis is buried up in Ohio next to his mother. I made that decision in a hospital hallway in about 4 minutes, and I have thought about it ever since. Shelby visits him. I do not. Shelby is my daughter and my only child. She is 41. She lives outside Dayton, Ohio, and she has been married to Grant Dorsey for 13 years. They have one boy, Nolan, who is 11 and who reads exactly like his mother did at that age, constantly and in bad light. They come down for 1 week every February. 1 week a year. It is the only time I see the three of them in a room together, and I want to be honest that I have spent 13 years arranging myself so that week smoothly. One more thing about Grant and then Monday. Grant documents things. He has always been that way. There is a cloud account somewhere with every step Nolan has taken since 2015 in it. At holidays, he narrates while he films, and the family long ago stopped noticing him do it, the same as people stopped noticing a ceiling fan. They landed on the Sunday night. By Monday afternoon, I had a list, and I am going to give it here in shift change order, because that is the only order my head has ever worked in. Monday. We went to the Cuban place on Ridgeway for lunch, the 4 of us. The girl came to take the order, and Grant ordered for Shelby. Not rudely. He said, "So have the chicken, no rice." And Shelby said nothing, and the girl wrote it down, and I sat there and felt something go sideways in my chest. 13 years, and I had never seen him do that. Or I had, and I had filed it under Men Being Men, which is a drawer I have kept a great deal in. 37 years on a floor teaches a person that the thing worth noticing is almost never the loud thing. It is the small procedure that has quietly become routine while nobody was writing it down. Tuesday. I offered to take Shelby to the outlet mall because she used to love it and she said she would rather stay in. Tuesday afternoon, I noticed she had no card. Not a debit card, not a credit card, not one of those prepaid ones. When we stopped for gas, she waited in the car. I filed it. I did not write it down, and I did not forget it either. That is what 37 years does to a person's memory. Nothing gets written, and nothing gets lost. Wednesday. 2 things. The first was Nolan's tooth. His left front tooth is broken off at a corner on a diagonal, and the broken edge had gone gray-brown at the margin. That is not new damage. That is months. I asked him about it in the pool. He said he did it at Christmas on the edge of the coffee table. I asked if it hurt, and he said only when he drinks something cold, and then he asked me not to bring it up. An 11-year-old asked me not to bring up his own tooth. The second was that Grant filmed me twice that day. Both times were maybe 15 seconds. Both times I had just gotten up from the chair or just come in from the carport. He would hold the phone up and say something friendly like, "There she is," and I would say something and he would put it down. He never showed anybody. He never posted anything, and both clips ended the second I finished talking, which is not how a person films a moment. It is how a person collects one. I noticed. Nobody else did. Grant documents things. And he was pleasant with me the entire week. Not fake pleasant, warm. It is the specific warmth people bring to a nurse right before they ask her to write something down a certain way. I have been on the receiving end of that about 400 times. Thursday is when it stopped being a list. Corky came over about the shutter inspection and stood in my carport counting panels, and in the middle of it he said, not looking at me, "Verna, your girl came by the house Tuesday." He said she asked if he had any work she could do that week. Cash, cleaning, filing, anything. Corky Bledsoe has known Shelby since she was a teenager coming down here in the summers. I went in the house and I waited until Grant took Nolan to the pool, and then I sat my daughter down at my own kitchen table and I offered her money. She would not look at me. She said, "I can't." I said it was mine to give and nobody had to know. And she said, "He checks." Then she told me. $60 a week for gas lunches and anything for Nolan and a receipt for all of it. If the number does not work out, he does not shout. He goes quiet for a few days, and she cannot stand the quiet. $60 a week for a woman who does the billing at an orthodontic practice and who I taught to balance a checkbook at the kitchen table when she was 14. That marriage had become weather to her. Nobody argues with 4 o'clock in August. She carried the umbrella and stopped mentioning it. I asked her to come home with me right then, her and Nolan, and stay as long as they wanted. She said, "Mom, don't, please." I have replayed that afternoon more than any other part of this. I could have pushed. I have pushed strangers' families a great deal harder than that over a discharge plan and been thanked for it 2 years later. But she was 41, and she was at my table asking me for exactly one thing, and the one thing was to leave it alone. So I left alone. That is the mistake in this story. It is mine, and no court has ever fixed it. Then Thursday night happened, and Thursday night is the reason for everything after it. At about 11, Nolan came into the front room holding the side of his face. I turned the lamp on and looked in his mouth. The gum above that broken tooth was swollen up, shiny and hot. An abscess in a child's face is not a thing that waits until morning. I have seen exactly how fast that can go bad, and I was not going to have that conversation with anybody. I got my keys. Grant said the emergency room would be $400, and it could hold until they got home Sunday, and he would call their dentist Monday. I said I was not going to the emergency room. I was going to the urgent care off Ulmerton in Largo, and I was going now, and he could come or not. He did not come. Shelby did. We were in that waiting room until nearly 4 in the morning. They drained it, they put him on antibiotics, and a physician's assistant who could not have been 30 asked Shelby in front of me how long the tooth had been broken. Shelby said since Christmas. The girl wrote it down and did not say anything, and I watched my daughter's face while she did not say anything, and that was the worst minute of the week. I paid for it. Nobody argued about that part. I got maybe 40 minutes of sleep on Friday morning, and then I was up at 7. That is what my body does after a night shift, and it has been doing it since 1981. Friday, I was not right. I want to be plain about that because it matters later. I had been awake 31 hours. I put the coffee grounds in without the filter. I could not remember the word for the lanai and had to point at it. I called Nolan by my brother's name, and my brother has been dead since 1994. And on Friday morning at about 8, standing at my kitchen counter, Grant held his phone up and said, "There she is." I did not think one thing about it. I was too tired to think one thing about anything. I have since come to believe that was point, though I cannot prove that part, and I am not going to pretend to you that I can. Saturday was the market, and the strawberries and the sentence in front of 2 tents. They flew home Sunday. I hugged my daughter at the curb at the airport, and she held on about 4 seconds longer than she has held on since she was a girl, and then she got in the line. And then it went quiet. I called on the Wednesday, and Grant answered and said she was in the shower. I called Sunday, and Grant answered and said she was at her sister-in-law's. I called twice the week after that, and nobody answered at all. I sent a card for Nolan with a $20 bill in it and got no word about whether it came. 3 weeks of that. And on the 17th of March, I did the thing that started the rest of it. I called Nolan's school outside Dayton. I did not make a scene. I asked the front office whether he was in class and whether the nurse had a record of dental follow-up on a tooth that had been abscessed in February. I told them exactly who I was. The woman was kind and told me she could not discuss a student with a grandparent, and I thanked her and hung up, and that was the whole call. 90 seconds. 9 days later, a young man in a polo shirt came up my driveway at 4 in the afternoon and asked if I was Verna Pruitt. He handed me a folder and said, "Ma'am, you've been served." And he was apologetic about it, and he got back in a Nissan and left. I stood in my own carport in the shade of my own hurricane shutters and read it standing up because I could not make myself carry it inside. Petition to determine incapacity. And behind it, petition for appointment of guardian. Circuit Court, Colusa County Probate Division. Petitioner Grant A. Dorsey. It said that Verna L. Pruitt, age 68, widowed, living alone, had shown a marked decline over the preceding year. That she was disoriented as to time and place, that she had been observed unable to perform simple household tasks, that she had misidentified close family members, that she had recently made alarming and inappropriate telephone calls to a public school in another state regarding a minor child, causing concern for her judgment, that her financial affairs, including an annuity of approximately $74,000, required immediate protection. It asked the court to appoint him. There was an exhibit list, 6 video files by file name and date. One of them was dated the 21st of February at 8:04 in the morning. I read those 6 file names twice. They were the plain ones a phone gives you. A date, a time, no title, nothing chosen. 6 of them out of 13 years of coming to my house. And behind the exhibit list on its own page, there was an affidavit in support. It was signed by Shelby. I read her paragraph 4 times standing up in that carport. It said that she had observed her mother's decline over the past year with increasing concern. That during a family visit in February, her mother had been confused, forgetful, and combative about routine matters. That she believed her mother was no longer able to manage her own affairs safely. My daughter's signature is a fast, sloped thing that has not changed since she was in high school, and it was right there under it. I want to be careful about what I am claiming, because I have had 4 months to think about it, and I have changed my mind twice. I do not believe my daughter wrote that paragraph. I believe she was handed it, told what it was, and told what would happen in the house if she did not sign. I believed that in the carport too for about 10 seconds. Then I stopped believing it for 6 weeks. Those 6 weeks belong to me, and I am not going to pretend they do not. A petition like that is verified, sworn. Both of them signed under penalty of perjury, and I know that now, and I did not know it then. What I knew standing in that carport was this. The child I drove to Largo at 2 in the morning had signed a piece of paper saying I could not be trusted with my own house. I sat down on the step, and then I did not call anybody for 2 days. Not Faye, because I did not have Faye yet. Not Corky, who was 40 feet away with his clipboard. There is a particular shame in being accused of losing your mind, and the first thing it does is make you want to prove you can handle it alone. That is the exact wrong move. I knew it was the wrong move while I was making it. The examining committee came 11 days later. Florida sends 3 of them, a physician, a psychologist, and a layperson. They came to my house into my lanai, with the heron out there doing his business in the canal. They sat in my chairs and asked me what year it was, and who the president was, and to count backward from 100 by 7s. Then the psychologist slid a sheet of paper over and asked me to draw a clock face showing 10 past 11. I have given that test. I have put that pencil into other people's mothers' hands maybe 200 times, on a med-surg floor gently at 9 in the morning, and then written down what came back. I want to tell you that it is an entirely different object from the other side of the table. The layperson on the committee was a retired postal supervisor who apologized with his eyes the whole hour. I answered every question. I was polite. I offered them iced tea and 2 of them took it. Then the physician, who was maybe 50 and had kind hands, asked me whether I had any idea why my son-in-law had filed this. And I said, because I asked about a tooth. He wrote that down and I watched him write it. And I understood exactly how that sentence was going to read to anybody who was not standing where I was standing. Faye Odom has an elder law practice in a converted house on Pinellas Street with a magnolia in front of it. She is about my age. She read the whole file without saying anything, which I appreciated, and then she took her glasses off. I expected her to tell me it was outrageous. She told me something worse. She said, "Verna, you are going to win this." She said the committee report would come back unanimous, because I am not incapacitated and nobody who spent an hour with me could pretend otherwise. She said the petition would be denied and the file would close and I would drive home. And then she said, "And on the day that happens, your daughter is going to get in the car with him and drive back to Ohio." I did not understand at first. She had to say it twice. Shelby is 41 years old. She is not a minor, and she is not incapacitated, and she has not asked anybody for help. There is no petition a mother can file about a grown woman who says she is fine. Everything I could actually prove was about me. Winning my own case just took me off the board. That is the thing nobody tells you about being the one on the outside who can see it. Being right is not the same as having standing. I went home and sat in the lanai and did not cry because I have never been much good at it. I made a list instead on the back of an envelope. Everything I actually knew in one column, everything I only believed in the other. The second column had all of it. 10 days later, Faye's office called and said the petitioner's exhibits had come over and did I want them emailed or on a drive. That is the part Grant did not think about, and I did not know it either until Faye explained it. Whatever he attached, he had to hand to my side. All 6 files. He gave them to us himself because the rules made him. I put that drive in the kitchen laptop and I could not do it. I sat there with my hand on the table for probably 10 minutes. Nobody wants to watch 6 clips somebody assembled to prove they are finished. Then I did it, and the first time through I was not listening at all. I was watching myself, which is the least useful thing a person can do with evidence. So I stopped. I put the earbuds in and started over. 3 times through, in the same order, no skipping. A bad chest never gives up anything on the first breath. The 4th file is the Friday morning one. 8:04 in the morning on the 21st of February. Me at my own counter-gray slow 31 hours awake, saying something that does not entirely track about the coffee. And behind me, from the front room off camera, my son-in-law's voice perfectly clear, in the middle of a sentence to my daughter, 60 for the week. And I want to see what's left of it on Sunday. He forgot he was in the room he was recording from. I sat in my kitchen at 11 o'clock at night with 2 earbuds in, and I listened to that 11 seconds about 40 times. Then I called Faye at home, which I have apologized for since. She listened to it and was quiet. Then she said the thing that nearly took the floor out from under me a second time. She said background audio is thin. She said any competent lawyer would call it a joke or a budget for a trip or a line taken out of context. A judge would very likely agree. It would come off as a family with money tension and a mother-in-law who does not care for her son-in-law. She said, It's not what he says. It's when he says it. Because the petition swears something about February. It says the family visit was the 11th through the 15th. 5 days, Sunday to Thursday. Exhibit 4 is dated the 21st. He backdated the visit for 2 reasons. It made the alarming phone call in March look like it came out of nowhere, months after any contact. And it kept the Largo urgent care visit out of the same week as everything else. A dated medical record with his son's name on it and his wife's signature at the bottom. So the date on his own file had to be real and provable, and not just a number in the corner of a video that any lawyer would say could be edited. Which is how the whole thing came down to Corky Bledsoe. Because on that Friday morning, faintly under my voice and under Grant's voice, there was a man out in the carport calling out panel numbers. The HOA shutter inspection. Corky starts the Thursday before the deadline and does about 9 carports a day. He writes every one on a clipboard with a date, and the sheet goes to the association office and sits in a binder for 7 years. I drove over to Sandpiper Lane and asked a 74-year-old man to look at a sheet of paper from February. He found it in about 4 minutes. Pruitt v. 8 panels all present labeled. Friday the 21st, 8 a.m. Corky said, "Verna, what's this about?" And I told him standing in his carport, and that big, slow man went very still and then said he would come. The hearing was on a Tuesday morning in the probate division, in a courtroom about the size of a classroom, with fluorescent light and a flag and a bailiff who looked bored. Grant was there in a suit I had never seen. His lawyer was young and expensive-looking. Faye had one accordion folder. Shelby was there. She sat on his side 3 feet from him in a cardigan I bought her. She did not look at me once in the first 20 minutes, and I am not going to pretend that did not do something to me. Corky sat in the back in a shirt with a collar. The committee report went in first, and it was exactly what Faye said it would be. 3 examiners, no findings, no incapacity, unanimous. Grant's lawyer talked about how these things are filed out of love and how the family's only concern was safety. The judge was a woman in her 60s who had clearly done 400 of these. And then Faye stood up and asked the court to play the petitioner's own Exhibit 4, in full with the volume up. Grant's lawyer objected on relevance, and I watched Grant's face while he did it, and Grant did not know why he was objecting. He genuinely did not know. He had watched those clips 100 times looking at me. The judge said she would allow it since it was his exhibit. They played it on a cart with a monitor and one of those flat speakers. 11 seconds of me being gray at my counter, and behind it, perfectly clear in a quiet courtroom, 60 for the week, and I want to see what's left of it on Sunday. Nobody moved. Somebody's chair creaked in the back row. And then, Faye asked the court to note the date on the file and to compare it with paragraph 6 of the verified petition. Paragraph 6 places the family in Ohio on that date, 6 days after they had gone home. Then she called Corky Bledsoe, who was sworn in. He said that on the morning of Friday, the 21st of February, he was in Verna Pruitt's carport counting 8 hurricane panels. He said he wrote it on a sheet, that the sheet sits in a binder at the association office, and that here was a certified copy of it. Corky was on the stand about 4 minutes. He called the judge ma'am 11 times. I looked at my son-in-law then. I had been waiting 6 weeks to look at him. The judge asked whether I wished to be heard, and Faye nodded, so I said it. In February, you told a market tent full of people that my daughter doesn't need a card, that she has you. I said, I would like the court to have heard what having you sounds like on a Friday morning. Grant said, Verna, and the judge said, Mr. Dorsey, don't. And my daughter turned around in her seat. That is all she did. She turned around and looked at me for the first time that morning, and her face was the face she had at 9 years old, when she had finally decided to tell me something. I had been waiting 6 weeks for that face. I think I had been waiting 13 years. Here is what came of it, and I am going to lay it out flat, because there is no point in a story where the wronged party gets a feeling instead of an outcome. The petition was denied. The court found no incapacity, restored nothing because nothing had been taken yet, and closed the file. Costs and my attorney's fees were assessed against the petitioner personally, which came to more than the trip down here has ever cost him. A petition to determine incapacity is verified, which means sworn under penalty of perjury. The judge referred paragraph 6 to the state attorney's office. Swearing to a false date in that document is false swearing. It is a criminal matter, and it is being handled by people who do not care at all that he wore a good suit. His lawyer withdrew 9 days later. Adult Protective Services opened a case out of that hearing, and it was not opened on me. It was opened on my daughter. The APS investigator was a woman named Tomlin, who had, I would guess, done this 2,000 times. She was the first person in 6 weeks to say the word financial exploitation and coercive control out loud to Shelby in my kitchen. Then she asked her whether she wanted to sit down. Shelby filed for an injunction for protection 11 days later and got exclusive use of the house in Ohio and temporary custody of Nolan and filed for divorce in June. The annuity was never touched. It was never really about the annuity. But it was in paragraph 9, and paragraph 9 is why a court had to be involved at all, instead of this being one more family that does not speak. There is one more piece of, and it did not land on me until I was driving home from that courthouse on the Tuesday. Grant chose Exhibit 4. Out of 6 files, that is the one his lawyer led with, and it is the one he put the date on because it is the strongest. It is the clip where I am most obviously not tracking slow gray, losing the word, saying something about the coffee that does not entirely make sense. I was like that because I had been awake 31 hours. I had spent from 11 at night until nearly 4 in the morning in a walk-in clinic off Ulmerton in Largo with his son. Nolan's face was swollen shut over a tooth that had been broken since Christmas because his father had said $400 and Monday. The best piece of evidence Grant Dorsey had that I could not be trusted with my own affairs is a recording of me the morning after I did the thing he would not pay for. It is June. Shelby and Nolan are in the second bedroom until the school year sorts itself out. Shelby has a card in her own name now and a checking account with nobody else on it. The first week she stood in my kitchen and cried about a $12 pair of sandals for 20 minutes. I understood it and did not comment on it. Nolan's tooth got capped in April. He shows it to people. Hurricane shutters are the same in the end. They go up for one bad week. Then one year a person notices they never came down and the house has been dark so long that dark is just what the house looks like from the inside. Somebody who does not live there has to say it out loud. I have thought about what I actually did here, and it was not clever and it was not brave. I read a body before I read a chart, which is the only thing I ever learned to do well. Then I listened to 11 seconds of a man's own recording 3 times in a row instead of once. If you have ever been the one on the outside who could see it and could not get anybody to look, that is the whole of what I have to offer. Keep looking anyway. Somebody eventually hands you the thing themselves. The heron is out there. Nolan has named him. There is nothing left in this that